Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, it's all about Mark Carney's government, which has faced an absolute firestorm of accusations of hypocrisy, not just from the Sikh community, but now by armies of journalists smelling globalist blood. We'll have the latest on the great Canadian betrayal of human rights in the pursuit of the dollar, including the laughable but perpetually predictable reaction from the Govt media. And if you thought the governor of California was a problem after vetoing SB 509, then, well, I've got some very concerning news for Sikhs across the whole of the USA. Stay tuned for some rather worrying news coming from the Gavin Newsom camp. All this and more on today's show, and of course loads of your great comments which poured in after the videos from last week, so do stay tuned for the end of the show and we'll go through lots of your great comments. Right, let's get underway. A lot to get through this morning. Of course, Mark Carney is visiting India as we speak, meeting his BFF, his best friend forever, Narendra Modi. And yes, of course, we've talked a lot about his visit to India, this sitting in the context of everything that we know about what he represents and everything that we know that has happened in Canada with regards, obviously, to the Sikh community and the Trudeau followed by Carney succession. So let me first of all, I'll start off this segment with, this is a video of Mark Carney actually speaking now after his arrival. It'll give you a flavour of clearly where this is all heading. Let me just play you this.
This visit marks the end of a challenging period and, more importantly, the beginning of a new, more ambitious partnership between two confident and complementary nations. Repeat, we know that strategic autonomy does not mean isolation. It means being strong enough to be a partner of choice. And India is one of our natural partners. Immediately after my election last year, our government set out to renew our relationship with India. I invited Prime Minister Modi to the G7 summit in Canada. When he came a few weeks later, we agreed to re-engage across security, energy, and technology. A few months later, at the G20 summit in Johannesburg, Prime Minister Modi and I launched a landmark partnership with Australia on critical minerals and technology. And we're now negotiating a comprehensive economic partnership agreement with the intention to double two-way trade by 2030. Our goal, to be clear, is to sign that agreement by the end of this year.
Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand is refusing to back up the assessment from a senior Canadian government official that the Indian government is no longer involved in murders and extortions in Canada, calling into question what the position of the Carney government is on this central issue that previously derailed Canada-India relations. Speaking with reporters in Mumbai, Anand was asked multiple times if she still believes that the Indian government was involved in violent crime in Canada, as the RCMP, CSIS and members of the Sikh community have all stated, and she didn't directly answer the question, instead saying she has, quote, concerns and that she appreciates the views of the Sikh community. They have been very vocal in disagreeing with the government on this issue, including two Liberal BC MPs who publicly criticized the government for what they say is an attempt to downplay India's involvement in violent crime. The senior official who briefed journalists before the trip started said multiple times that Mark Carney would not be taking this trip if they still believed that India was behind the violence in Canada. Anand didn't go that far, but said it's important for Canada to come to countries like India, and that diplomacy is not about hiding under a rock. Mackenzie Gray, Global News, Mumbai.
There you go. Global News on it, as they always are. Welcome to Global News. Yeah, Mark Carney's speech there. It's interesting. He talks about India is a partner of choice. A partner of choice. So he has consciously stated and publicly stated that India, we have chosen to partner with India, despite everything that we know. And Global News, of course, referred to interesting elements there, of course, this issue, where unnamed Canadian officials actually said just a few days ago, that Carney would not go to India if the Indian government was still involved in political interference, violence and transnational repression that was targeting Sikh activists and businesses. Yet, here we see Prime Minister Mark Carney touching down in Mumbai to begin his high-stakes trade mission to India. And unsurprisingly, there's a very dark shadow hanging over that diplomatic red carpet. So while the Carney administration is trying to frame this trip as a pragmatic necessity, to diversify trade away from, obviously, a volatile United States. And notice he also talked about minerals and technology. Canada's Sikh community sees this as something a lot more sinister. It is a cold-blooded betrayal of Canadian sovereignty and the lives of its citizens. And the timing of the visit couldn't be more damning. Just days before Carney's visit, a prominent Sikh activist, Maninder Singh, who I talked about last week, he was visited by Vancouver police and handed a duty to warn notice. And this was no routine thing. For the first time, and he's had several credible threats to life notices over recent years for his activism for the Khalistan cause and for the Sikh community. But this time, the threat to life was not just to Maninder himself, it was to his wife and children. And despite this chilling evidence that Indian transnational repression is alive and well on Canadian soil, the Carney government chose to proceed with this trip, chose to say the words, India is a partner of choice, shaking the very hand of the regime accused of orchestrating those threats against a Canadian citizen. It's all about gaslighting. The community in Canada is being gaslit. So the most jarring element of this diplomatic reset, and he did talk about, and that report talked about Anita Anand. I've got a great video coming up in a moment. Just stay with me on this one. So the most jarring element of this whole diplomatic reset is this narrative being spun by anonymous government officials. In a background briefing to journalists last Wednesday, a senior official claimed the government is, quote, confident that the violent activity India was accused of has not continued. So the Canadian government said, officially, but behind the scenes, it's over. There is no more threat. And this is a statement that's obviously sparked outrage. And the official said, I really don't think we'd be taking this trip if we thought these kinds of activities were continuing. And yet, just around that very same day, Maninder Singh receives from Canadian law enforcement, basically the Canadian government receives a threat to his life warning. Now, to the Sikh community, this is nothing short of state-sponsored gaslighting. How can the government claim the violence has stopped when law enforcement is actively issuing death threat warnings to activists at the exact same moment? And the legal counsel for the World Sikh Organisation of Canada summed up the sentiment of everybody. He said, it feels like a betrayal. It's just completely ridiculous to suggest the violence has ceased while the community continues to be targeted. Now, this controversy has left Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister, Anita Anand, in a really, really embarrassing and I have to say untenable position. So during a recent interview, and this has gone, and I'll show you the video now, it's gone viral, but for all the wrong reasons. Anita Anand was repeatedly pressed by a mob of journalists, and this is great. Don't forget, this isn't just people like me talking on behalf of the Sikh community. These are mainstream journalists now, repeatedly pressing on whether her government truly believes Indian interference has ended. And as I play this, just see if you can hear her answer the question yes or no. She's asked the question very regularly, yes or no. Here we go. Have a look at this.
Minister. On the question of public safety, as you know, an official said, I think we could say we're confident that activity, being extortion and threats of violence, is not continuing. I know you gave numerous interviews in Canada where you talked about guardrails, you talked about other things in the transcript, but I do not understand, yes or no, do you share that position? Has the violence ended, yes or no?
We are continuing at all times to take public safety and security in Canada, including transnational repression and foreign interference, seriously. That includes a key message that I would like to deliver today, which is that no country has a pass when it comes to Canadian public safety and security. That is the reason why we've listed the Bishnoi gang as a terrorist entity. That is the reason why we ordered senior Indian diplomats and government officials to leave our country. That is the reason why we have passed or are introducing laws relating to extortion and online harm and surveillance. That is the reason why in my joint statement with my counterpart counterpart, Minister Jaishankar, I have specifically indicated that the rule of law, the respect for the criminal code in our country, as well as an independent enforcement mechanism, will continue to occur regardless.
Is this activity ongoing, yes or no?
As I said, foreign interference, transnational repression is taken extremely seriously by our government, and it will continue to be taken seriously because no country has a pass when it comes to domestic public safety.
Blah, blah, blah. The journalist is saying yes or no. Is it continuing? It's a very simple question. You get this trotted out answer. This goes on for 10 minutes. Journalists basically asking over and over again the same question, yes or no. Is India still continuing its transnational repression? And it just goes on and on and on. I'll just play a little bit more.
The other portion of the comment that you said that is what you did agree with?
I agree that we need to continue to address all issues of public safety and security, and those include foreign interference and transnational repression. That's why when I was here laying the foundation for this visit with the Prime Minister now, back in October, we had a joint statement with Minister Jaishankar in which we have a dialogue going on and in order to make progress, you need to be at the table. And we have seen progress being made at initial level and continue to do in the short. Appreciate deeply feeling and will continue, Shankar. Priority one is to ensure that the dialogue on public.
Oh, I can't listen to any more of it. I mean, basically, she just goes on and on and on, just with these platitudes, this political, pardon my language, this political bullshit. She knows that the spotlight is on her now. She knows she is in a really, really embarrassing position. And yet she's just trying to talk her way out of it, as politicians tend to do. And well done to, these are all mainstream journalists who are firing this very, very simple question at her. Is Indian transnational repression ongoing, yes or no? And all she does, she just trots out this nonsense pre-prepared script. So instead of acknowledging the reality of the ongoing threats that actually are being reported even now by the RCMP and CSIS, she's just retreating into these pre-prepared, scripted platitudes, these political answers, stating that, quote, no country will ever have a pass regarding Canadian safety and that the rule of law is paramount. Yeah, great, but answer the question. If the rule of law is paramount, then why is Carney still in India? But her inability to reconcile this duty of war notices to people like Maninder Singh with her government claim that India is no longer a threat has been described by everybody as a complete slap in the face. It is. It's an utter slap in the face to those who are living under the constant fear of transnational oppression. And she failed to clarify if she did or did not agree with unnamed Canadian officials that said Carney wouldn't go to India if the Indian government was still involved in political interference, violence and TNR, transnational repression. She just would not answer the question. So it is a missed opportunity to set the record straight. And it basically guarantees now that Canadian reporters, because they are like terriers, they are dogs with a bone, they are now going to pose the same questions to Mark Carney. There's a press conference today, which obviously hopefully we'll report on tomorrow. There is a press conference today with Mark Carney. And unless a written statement is actually issued to clarify this statement by Canadian officials that said Mark Carney won't go to Canada if TNR was still going on, that TNR must have stopped. Well, that contradicts the issue of threats to life warnings to Maninder Singh, etc., etc. So they need to issue and clarify that that was a false statement made by Canadian officials, or admit India is a problem. The motivation for all this is absolutely clear. It's all again about money, dollars, commerce. So with the threat, of course, with US tariffs looming, Carney is desperate to tap into his partner of choice, India's massive market. He's aiming, if you remember that original speech I showed you, he's aiming to double bilateral trade to $70 billion by 2030. So business leaders, and that's not you or me, this is the elite, the wealthy elite, ultimately, when it comes to minerals and tech, those elite in both Toronto and Mumbai are cheering this strategic move. And the cost of that is, of course, being paid in the safety of Canadian Sikhs. So as Carney meets Modi to pursue this free trade deal, Carney is effectively signalling that the 2023 assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar and everything that's happened since, the threats of a wider campaign of violence, they're now unfinished business that the government is willing to overlook for the sake of profitability. But I'm delighted to say the backlash is growing. It's not just coming now from the Sikh community and people like ourselves. Liberal MPs, particularly from regions with large Sikh populations like Brampton, are now facing intense pressure to denounce the government's rhetoric. Some have already actually broken ranks, calling these claims that India has stopped its interference, quote, shocking, and, quote, a U-turn that dismisses the tireless work of Canadian security agencies like CSIS, who are working over and over again to try and highlight the fact that India is threatening the Sikh population of Canada. RCMP, main commissioner, has admitted it publicly on record. So as Mark Carney tours the Taj Mahal Hotel and discusses uranium exports, the reality back home remains very clear. It's one of fear and frustration. For people like Maninder Singh and others, the message from Ottawa is loud and clear. In this new era of pragmatic Canadian foreign policy, some lives are simply more expendable than others. And the question does remain, can a trade deal built on the silence of a persecuted community ever truly be considered a success? Well, we'll find out at the next Canadian election. So, as I said, the reaction from the community has been very loud and very clear. Unsurprisingly, the Sikh Federation have been on it. They issued a statement a couple of days ago. Devinderjit Singh, he's the lead exec, and he basically said, and he reiterates a lot of obviously what we've been talking as well, and he said, look, Mark Carney's credibility is at stake. The question is, will he defend the rule of law and the sovereignty of Canada, or admit he's become the latest victim of India's threats and economic coercion? Well, I think that's a rhetorical question, Devinderjit. I think we all know the answer to that. It's sitting writ large in his words as he lands in India. The conundrum he faces is the Indian government remains in total denial about its role, including the high-profile assassinations of Nijjar and the promotion of violent crime on Canadian soil. If Carney needed a timely reminder, he needs to look no further than the police warning to Maninder. And don't forget, Maninder actually heads up the Sikh Federation of Canada. So this is why the Sikh Federation have got a stake in this game, because one of their key high-profile members is actually one of the targets of India's transnational repression. Mark Carney also knows there's been a dramatic surge in extortion attributed to transnational criminal syndicates based in India. Don't forget, the Bishnoi gang has been declared a terrorist outfit by Carney's own government. So therefore, Carney's own government, who have linked the Bishnoi gang to India, have declared it a terrorist organisation. Terrorist implies politics. Therefore, they are tying up the Indian government. So the Canadian government have actually admitted, again, in another direction, that the Bishnoi gang is perpetuating Indian transnational repression. And the Sikh Federation press release goes on about Mark Carney's speech in Davos, for those who watched it, at the World Economic Forum, because, of course, he is an alumnus of the World Economic Forum, called on countries to reject economic coercion by great powers. And yet here he is, Carney, the great hypocrite, being coerced economically by India, pressured by India. And Devinderjit finalises his statement. We want to remind him that in April 2024, Modi said in his speech, and I trot this out regularly, we don't send dossiers, we kill them in their homes. Remember that speech that Modi gave to a BJP audience just before the elections. Mark Carney will therefore be accused of total hypocrisy, will be, He already is Dabindajit. We are calling him out right now. He is a hypocrite if he fails to ignore the ground reality and does not strongly object to the transnational repression by the Indian government and its promotion of violent crime on Canadian soil. Well, again, all I would say to the Sikh Federation is, I think you're behind the curve on this. We know that he is a hypocrite. He's standing out there making these great speeches, talking about partners of choice, while Maninder and his family are receiving death threats from India, as acknowledged by Carney's own government. So the hypocrisy is there in black and white. There's no ambiguity. Anyway, they also issued this sort of, it's almost like a card you can print out and laminate, just to remind us of the basic facts. Officials' controversial claims before Carney went to India. Unnamed officials brief reporters to justify Carney's visit. They claimed Canada wouldn't visit India if India was interfering in democracy. It is. Asserted Canada has right mechanisms to detect and disrupt threats. It does, and it is doing. Well done to the RCMP and CSIS. Sadly, not reflected by the politicians. Sikh community called out statements as misleading. Contradicts 2.5 years of warnings from Trudeau and law enforcement. Threats of transnational repression remain a concern. Absolutely it does. 48 hours later, no ministers, CSIS or RCMP defended the officials' claims. So this is a key nuance here that actually they have brought out. When that Canadian government official said, if we knew that India was still perpetuating transnational repression, Carney will not visit India. And yet Carney does go on. So why did CSIS or the RCMP not come out publicly? Why did the very agencies that know and have issued a threat to life warning to Maninder Singh, why did they not in the last few days come out and say, why is Mark Carney going to India when we have admitted that India is guilty of this? Now, today, India is threatening our sovereign citizens. And yet, Carney is now in Mumbai. Why are they silent? I bet there's some very interesting meetings going on behind the scenes where there's some probably very worried officials thinking, what are we going to do? You know, it's going to look rather embarrassing. We're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. But then it comes down to principles. You know, your duty is to protect Canadian citizens. And yet now you're failing in that duty. Etc., etc. And then it finishes off with a demand for clarity and truth. Carney urged to break silence, clarify existing threats and distance from untruths. There's no chance. He's a globalist. He's only interested in tying up trade deals for his billionaire mates in India. Canadian public deserves total clarity. It does. It's not going to get it, though. Not whilst Carney's still there. Anyway, more interestingly, backlash from the Dal Khalsa. Dal Khalsa, of course, representing the pro-Khalistan movement based in Punjab. They have likewise, they've raised their head up above, and unsurprisingly, I'd almost say predictably, they likewise have said, look, we need to do something about this. The Dal Khalsa did formally actually write a letter. They've written a formal letter to Mark Carney, to Mark Carney's government, urging him to, in a very diplomatic way, to prioritise issues of the rule of law and, of course, the growing influence of organised crime in Canada. In this letter that went straight to PM Carney, it came from this guy, Kanwar Pal Singh of the Dal Khalsa. He's the Secretary for Political Affairs of the Dal Khalsa. He emphasised that Sikhs in Canada and the Punjab, of course, hold high expectations for justice and fairness. Absolutely. It's written into the Sikh principles. And he did strike a bit of an emotional chord in his letter. And he said the Sikh community in Punjab would actually have greatly appreciated a visit by Mark Carney, for example, to the Darbar Sahib, the Golden Temple in Amritsar. So far, it's not in his itinerary. Can you imagine the positive message, at least, even just the vaguest feeling of support for his own Sikh community back in Canada if he actually visits the Golden Temple? Let's see. It's not on his itinerary then. Now, the Dal Khalsa said they expressed a sense of relief regarding recent policy statements by Anita Anand, where Anita Anand recently confirmed that while the core agenda of the diplomatic visit revolves around trade, energy, technology, primacy will also be accorded to discussions concerning the rule of law, transnational repression and the Bishnoi factor. Again, I think that's a little bit... It's diplomatic language, but I think this is very, very hopeful and optimistic. If you honestly think Anita Anand, who's just avoided that question, is going to actually raise anything with her counterparts, I'm sure she'll pay lip service, as it's called to it. She'll talk about it, but she won't say, look, all deals are off unless you stop killing our citizens. She's not going to say that. Of course she's not. So the Dal Khalsa leadership, Kanwarpal Singh, said, demanded actually, that Carney raise these issues with Mr Modi, stating it would reassure the Sikh diaspora that their fundamental rights, including the right to life, will not be traded away for business and financial deals. And the letter itself highlighted what it called a fear psychosis currently gripping the Sikh diaspora in Canada, citing a drastic increase in extortions, attacks on people's homes, murder threats by these Indian-sponsored vigilante groups. And the group finally urged Carney and his office to actively engage with the Sikh community to alleviate these mounting concerns. Well, again, I think great aspirations, great diplomatic language, but ultimately it is, it's going to fall on barren ground. These demands, these appeals to the Carney government are just going to be swatted back with platitudes like Anita Anand and her pre-prepared answers to all the journalist questions. It's just not going to happen. Carney has a very, very clear agenda. Carney's agenda represents the globalists. It represents the people of Davos. It represents the World Economic Forum. It does not represent its minority communities in Canada, who are, frankly, a thorn in his side. They are an inconvenience. Justin Trudeau, on the other hand, had the courage to stand out and call out India's transnational repression to his own political demise, sadly. Carney's no such creature. Carney is a creature of commerce. He's a creature of trade that doesn't benefit you or I or ordinary Canadian citizens. It benefits the global elite. That's why he was parachuted into a position of leading Canada with no political experience. In what democracy does that happen? In what democracy does somebody just suddenly get parachuted in? He hasn't risen up through the democratic hierarchy like any normal leader does. He was just basically parachuted in by the puppeteers of the world, the globalists. And, if that doesn't raise enough red flags. And unsurprisingly, what we're now experiencing, that the Dal Khalsa, Sikh Federation, World Sikh Organisation, all these Sikh organisations are trying to call out. This is what's going on in front of our very eyes. It is hidden in plain sight. These are the globalists laughing in your faces. You don't matter. We don't matter. The Sikh community doesn't matter. They're tying up billion-dollar trade deals that aren't benefiting us. But as I say, the good news about all this is that the Western press, and particularly the Canadian press, and I want to say Western press, British press has been remarkably silent on this, I have to say, apart from... In fact, I'm trying to think of some exceptions. I can't actually. The Guardian, just about, at least does talk regularly about transnational repression against the Sikh community. But I'll talk about the Guardian in a moment. But yes, the Western press, fortunately, certainly North American press, and specifically the Canadian press, well done to the Canadian press, people like Global News. They're here. They are seeing this woman face to face, and they're holding her face to the fire, asking her over and over again, why are you lying, basically? Yes or no? Are Sikhs being targeted or not? Admit it. Anyway, so now I just want to zip across to this is thank you to one of my correspondents who brought this one to my attention. This is Ian's Live. This is another Govt media outlet. And they, with all this going on, and of course the Indian media are all over Carney's visit. They're loving it. They're lapping it up. They're absolutely rubbing their hands with glee. that Carney is in India endorsing their murders of the Sikh community. Clearly, although they're not saying it out loud in his clear words, they're saying it doesn't matter that we're killing these Khalistani terrorists because Mark Carney, his own citizens that we're killing, seems to be okay with it. Welcome to India. Let's shake hands and embrace each other like brothers. Anyway, the Govt media, of course, as I say, all very predictable, but I picked this one specific one up because it really just highlights, it actually encapsulates a lot of what we're talking about. This is Ian's Live. It is another Indian outlet. There specifically, this came out a couple of days ago, and it talks about the Hindu Canadian Foundation, the HCF. It's another RSS organisation, like the HAF, Hindu American Foundation, HSS, etc. All these Kona, all these basically RSS affiliated organisations that are just networked across North America to push the Hindutva agenda. Well, the HCF, the Hindu Canadian Foundation, that does claim it represents Hindu Canadians, well, it represents the RSS, and allied multicultural communities across Canada. This report says the HCF has expressed grave concern over the persistent harassment and intimidation directed at the Hindu community, its temples and Indian diplomatic officials in recent years. It accuses pro-Khalistan elements of repeatedly exploiting the right to protest by targeting communities and temples, often hiding behind the claims of free expression while engaging in aggressive and divisive tactics. I mean, this can be immediately thrown out because this is what happens in a democracy. You're allowed to protest. You're allowed to protest. You're allowed the freedom of speech to disagree with you. And if they were indeed engaging in aggressive and divisive tactics, that's called protest, which clearly you don't like because you're Indian. You don't like democratic protest, certainly if it goes against your narrative. And this is what they're trying to build up, saying it's basically what they're trying to imply is violent. It isn't. There's no violence there. So it's having to write, the author of this has said, engaging in aggressive and divisive tactics. So you're trying to big it up to say it's violent, but it's not violent. Yeah, it's aggressive, it's loud, it's vocal. Expressing support for Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney's ongoing official visit to India, the HCF said this trip represents a vital step towards strengthening bilateral relations, diversifying Canada's trade partnerships, attracting investment, advancing opportunities for Canadian workers and businesses. Hindu Canadians and other multicultural groups have long advocated for renewed and constructive engagement between Canada and other vibrant democracies with deep historical, cultural and economic connections. Well, first of all, India isn't a democracy. It's only a democracy in name only. It's not a democracy, as we talked about regularly. And it's all very well, yeah, let's have these trade deals, but they don't benefit normal people. It's benefiting, well, as you say, Hindus. It's benefiting Hindutva. It's benefiting anybody allied with the RSS. But actually, in your ignorance, you're not realising ordinary Hindus are not benefiting from this. It's rubbish. And it talks about the foundation of these ties between Canada and India is rooted in mutual respect. Really? So, mutual respect involves India murdering Canadian citizens? Shared values, it says. India doesn't share values with Canada. It shares values with Mark Carney, but not with the rule of law and democratic principles that Canada was founded on. There's no shared values there. And the contributions of millions of Canadians of Indian heritage who enrich our nation every day. Yeah, mainly Sikhs, it has to be said. The HCF further highlighted a pattern of attacks that began with the Indian consulates in Canada, escalated to threatening Hindu Canadians and their places of worship, and now targets prominent Canadian leaders, including against Anita Anand, and full-throated attacks on Prime Minister Carney. So it's trying to drum up this whole sort of portfolio of attacks against Hindus. Once again, Hindus are these victims of these attacks. There are no attacks. There's democratic protest. There's people in the media calling out Hindus, Hindutva, for what they're up to, for transnational oppression, for their RSS ideology, infiltrating Canadian politics, manipulating democratic policies. But they're calling that attacks Protests against Jai Shankar when he visited. Yeah, democratic protest. That's allowed in a democracy. It's not allowed in India because you're not a democracy. But it's allowed in Canada and you don't like it. And full-throated attacks on Carney. Yeah, what does that mean? Full-throated. By definition, vocal. That's allowed in a democracy. There's nothing wrong with that. Why do you have a problem with that? Etc. These violent attacks. It talks about violent attacks against mandirs. Really? Show us some proof. Where's the proof? I always say this. Where's the proof? And they say, these actions cross a clear line. While peaceful protest is a cornerstone of Canadian democracy, yes it is, bullying, threats and extremism that target elected leaders or religious sites have no place in our society. You're absolutely right. So where is it? Where is extremism? You always talk about Khalistani extremism. Where is the evidence? Khalistan movement is not extremist movement. It is a peaceful democratic movement that protests regularly, and that is what you have a problem with. And you are struggling to try and call it out by using terms like terrorists, extremists, never backed up with evidence. Again, it's just propaganda. As you say, Khalistani outfits have weaponized the narrative around India in ways that unfairly vilify the land from which every Hindu Canadian traces their heritage, turning it into a tool for division rather than dialogue. So you're trying to say that Khalistanis have now weaponized a narrative. I mean, you can see the absolute irony here, where India is the one trying to control and weaponize a narrative, calling Khalistanis extremists and terrorists. If that isn't weaponizing language, I don't know what is. Vilifying the land from which every Hindu Canadian traces their heritage. Vilifying India? Yeah, because India is killing Canadian Sikhs. It's killing British Sikhs. It's killing American Sikhs. Who's doing the vilifying here? Again, it's incredible, the language that they use. The HCF unequivocally condemns this escalating bullying and growing extremism. Bullying is called democratic protest. Basically, what you're saying is we're not allowed to stand up against your bullying, your violence, your terrorism, your extremism. If we dare stand up and call it out, you're accusing us of being bullying and growing extremism. Do me a favour, etc., etc. And the article goes on. I mean, I'm apoplectic in outrage at just the hypocrisy in this article. As I say, it's just the Govt media. Once again, it's the old propaganda. It just churns out this nonsense. They must have AI bots now. They must prompt AI to say, right, just write a whole article about Khalistan extremism, terrorists, etc. Please produce these. And we do know that this well-oiled propaganda machine coming out of India, it just churns out these articles by the hundreds. It just disseminates it through mainstream Govt media, which in turn is then picked up by Western news aggregators like Yahoo and these things, and then just get disseminated and picked up by Western media, and then just reprinted without actually checking or verifying the facts. And this is why we see so many articles like this across the internet, because they're just churned out by these bot factories, these Hindutva factories that just churn out rubbish like this. Anyway, so there you go. Right, let's move on to... this is interesting and slightly concerning. Thank you to one of my correspondents on email. Thank you very much. You know who you are. Much appreciated for this. Picked up an interview of Governor Gavin Newsom of California. He of SB 509 fame. Remember, that was the Senate Bill 509 that was promoted by all the ethnic minorities in California, and it was designed to combat transnational oppression. Well, actually not specifically India, but any transnational oppression against any minority in California. It was there to help train law enforcement, state entities to recognise and combat transnational oppression. That was it. It wasn't against India. It was basically just a general bill to help protect the minorities of California. It was vetoed, despite all the minorities' huge support right across California. It was assumed it would just pass. It would be rubber stamped because why would anybody oppose this bill? It was vetoed by Gavin Newsom, primarily because the Hindutva RSS network in California and right across North America pressured him, manipulated him into vetoing it. How? We don't know. But clearly he has bowed and buckled to pressure from Hindutva to veto SB 509. This guy, Gavin Newsom, is no friend of Sikhs. He's no friend of minorities in California. He's a clear and present danger. He is a political clear and present danger to any minorities in the United States, because he clearly is open to manipulation and pressure from outside interests. Read India. Anyway, he was interviewed just a few days ago by the Guardian newspaper. The Guardian newspaper in the UK is a left-leaning news outlet. And I have to say, I'm not a big fan of The Guardian. I tend to be more on the right of centre. But what I do give The Guardian credit for, they have stuck up for the Sikh community, and they regularly do write articles about transnational repression against British Sikhs. They highlight some of the outrages like Jagtar Singh Johal and the failure of the Labour government. Again, despite being left-wing, they still do hold the Labour government to account for its failure, for example, to help secure the release of Jagtar Singh Johal, etc., etc. So The Guardian actually is one of the few mainstream outlets that does hold the Labour government to account of its failure to protect the Sikh community, as opposed to most of the mainstream press here in the UK. And I think that actually highlights the fact that most of the mainstream press in the UK represents the British establishment. The British establishment, for whatever reasons, probably historic, is deeply tied to the Indian establishment. So you will rarely find the British mainstream news calling out India and its transnational repression, because basically they are a tool of the British establishment and therefore embedded and seem to be supporting India's transnational repression against our very own Sikh community. Anyway, so back to the case in point. This is Gavin Newsom being interviewed by the Guardian newspaper. And I want to play you just a couple of excerpts. It's quite a long interview. But it turns out Governor Gavin Newsom appears to finally have dropped his coy act. He actually made this statement: I would rather be candid, in other words, truthful, than coy, as in evasive or not really answering. So he's finally dropped this act, hinting that he could see himself stepping into the void for the 2028 Democratic nomination. Now, if this doesn't send shivers down your spine, it will do when you hear his interview. Basically, this guy is thinking about running for president of the United States for the Democrats. So the mainstream media is focusing on his suave image, and he's promoting his new book, Young Man in a Hurry. But the Sikh diaspora is looking at this guy with a deep, justified sense of horror, because he is not just a progressive champion. He's pushing this progressive, dangerous agenda. He is, of course, the guy behind the vetoing of SB 509. And his consistent foot-dragging, delaying legislation that would provide any explicit protection against India's transnational repression. So if he is willing to sacrifice the safety of California's Sikhs to appease wealthy donors and foreign lobbyists now, God help us if he gets to the White House. Anyway, let me play you the first half of, or at least the first minute or two of where this in this interview it comes up.
You once said that it's better to be candid than to be coy. And so with that in mind, in that spirit, I know you're not going to tell me what you've decided about 2028. So I'm not going to
set up
you.
Question. I shouldn't have said that. Yeah.
But you can tell me if you have made up your mind. And so better to be candid than to be coy. So have you made up your mind what you're going to do about 2028?
Yeah, let me very clearly say this. Absolutely, I have not. And sincerely, and for multiple reasons. I've got a sense of where the world is at the moment. We'll see where it is in a year from now, 2 years from now. Do you meet that moment? Are you a solution to a problem? I'm a guy, I get it. I got a sell by date. I still can't believe 960 SAT in American terms. Look that up. Not very good. I can't read a speech. I'm sitting here with you. You're even asking that question and indulging me and wasting your audience's time. That's even a prospect. That's humbling and extraordinary. And so I'm not going to say no, because I'd be lying by saying that, but I absolutely cannot say yes.
And if
And then his next question, which I'll come on to, I want you to pay particular attention to his very final statement.
And if this were the moment, given your point about meeting the moment, and I understand it's a year or two, but if this were the moment, would you be offering yourself to the country as an answer?
That's a great follow-up question. I appreciate that. And it's an insightful one because I'm now reflecting on that. I've been very frustrated with my party this last year. That's why I've been more aggressive, more assertive. And I think it really happened after the federalization of the National Guard that happened, remember, in my state first in Los Angeles. 4,000 National Guard were federalized, 700 active duty Marines were not sent overseas, were sent to the second largest city in the United States. And I was filled with outrage and sense of purpose and mission and frustration with my party not being more aggressive. And so in many ways, I could, that moment where now I had an expression of why and clarity of purpose, and certainly was mission driven. I might be a little bit more candid with you that I would have taken that call and picked up that baton. But there's a lot of great people in a year or two. And look, we have to win. All that matters is winning now. Not winning the argument, winning.
It's just shifted from his usual platitudes about inclusion to something a lot more ruthless. He said, we have to win. It's not about winning the argument, but just winning. That statement is horrifying. It doesn't matter how we do it, we have to win. We're not going to try and win an argument here, win the electorate's support. We just have to win at all costs. It doesn't matter how we do it. That in itself, I just find really deeply sinister. It's what they call a mask off moment. The mask has slipped. It implies a win at all costs that bypasses the need to actually persuade or protect voters. And this rhetoric mirrors the win by any means accusations that have dogged the Democratic establishment for years. From the DNC's alleged sidelining of grassroots candidates to the lawfare tactics used against political opponents, particularly Trump, Newsom's admission suggests a candidate who views democracy not as a process or a service, but as a game of conquest. It's win at any cost. This is concerning. And the prospect of a Newsom presidency, it basically continues this democratic theme that really has dogged American politics, Clinton's, Obama's, Biden's. It prioritizes pragmatism over human rights of minorities. We had the Clinton legacy, for example, a period where trade with oppressive regimes was prioritized over human rights, particularly in the East. We had the Obama-Biden era that saw the deepening of the strategic partnership with India, always at the expense of ignoring Hindu extremism and, of course, Sikh persecution. And Newsom's stepping into the void, as he referred to, suggests he's ready to go. He wants to do this. This is a man who practices pluralism in name, but whose actions, like his recent knee-pad diplomacy at Davos, yes, he's another World Economic Forum advocate, is showing he wants to be accepted by the global elite. He's basically on his knees in front of the global elite saying, please take me in, I want to be one of you. But for Sikhs and Khalistanis, fighting Indian transnational oppression, a Newsom administration would mean 4, maybe 8 years, God forbid, of Washington turning a blind eye to things like duty to warn notices and assassinations. Govt Singh Panun, another prime example. So he admitted he is only now starting to take this mask off. He talked about obsessive drive, grit born from childhood struggles earlier in the interview. But for the Sikh community, the mask he's removing reveals a politician who is really has questionable ethical requirements of leadership. This guy is dangerous. We've seen it in SB 509. This guy should never be near the levers of democracy. God help us if he runs and gets in. Anyway, you have been warned. Let's move on to our comments column. Thank you. Loads of comments came in after the videos last week. Fefa Nus, I'm going to have to zip through these because we're already running out of time. Loads to get through today. Fefa Nus, I love this. Just lots and, well, I shouldn't love it. It's lots and lots of crying faces, but it's just the way you managed to dig them all out. Hundreds of emojis. Anyway, thank you for that. Avtar Singh, look, we need to get together and take on our greedy scumbag governments because of their human rights record. You're absolutely right. Sikhs must support only countries that support Sikhs. Yeah, I think we're already on it. I think Sikhs are united in trying to support countries that only support Sikhs. But ultimately, we know there is only one country that will ultimately genuinely support Sikhs and take Sikh interests at its heart, and that's Khalistan. Unfortunately, all of us who align with the Sikh community, we're never going to see justice. We're never going to see genuine protection. Sikhs are never going to feel truly safe anywhere in the world until Khalistan is established and people can then move to that sanctuary that will be a sovereign Sikh nation. Critics Corner, this was an interesting one. That video, the agenda hiding in plain sight, this video had one of our lowest ever viewings. And interestingly, there was a lot of Hindutva comments on there. Clearly that video was targeted by whoever, because it had it got so shadow banned. It immediately, within 2 hours of uploading this video, I knew something was up because it followed a totally different trajectory in terms of its views, etc., comments, everything. Really suspicious. Stay Safe, who's on our comments every day. Thank you, Stay Safe, for your support. Likewise, you noticed something. My comments got deleted. It's on my profile. I log out, the message is gone. And then you actually point out that United States, something like, I forget what you said it was, they've banned another popular pro-Khalistan channel. It keeps getting taken down. There was a leak of Indian Forces Chief of Staff tweets, etc., etc. In other words, India on this. India are getting increasingly terrified. They are terrified with what's going on. They know that we're winning this battle. We are winning the propaganda war, if you want to call it. But basically, it's the truth war. Because we're coming up with the truth, they're just generating nonsense. And because they're generating propaganda, they're losing it, because the truth always wins. And I talked about some Hindutva comments. JJMA, welcome to the channel, JJMA. Yes, this Gora, this white man, is sitting in front of a terrorist photo. I think Sant Janel Bindranvaliji might be a little bit upset by being labelled as a terrorist after giving his life at the hands of the Indian state. Blasted to pieces by a line of Indian tanks attacking the most sacred holy site for Sikhs in the world, and yet you call him the terrorist. Do me a favour. And you think this channel is objective, or you don't think this channel is objective and fact-based. Well, instead of making comments like that, tell me why. What have I said that is untruthful? Tell me any facts that I have given that are not true. If I'm not objective, I'm not objective. I am pro-Khalistan. But I used to be objective, and that's why I'm pro-Khalistan, because I looked at all the facts, I looked at India's narrative, and I looked at the Khalistan narrative. And it was very obvious to anybody with half a brain to work out who's telling the truth. Because history doesn't lie. 1984 wasn't a lie. 1980s and 1990s, tens of thousands of young Sikh men being murdered by the Indian state. That wasn't a lie. That's the truth. They are the facts that you're conveniently trying to ignore. And in your second comment, you're trying to paint Nijar as some sort of terrorist. Yeah, you're mopping up. Unfortunately, sadly, JJMA, you've just been completely and utterly indoctrinated by the Govt media. You believe everything that you're spoon-fed by the Indian media. And Panoon sits in the lap of ISI. No, he doesn't. Yeah, again, it's hilarious. Absolute disgrace to Sikhi. No, it's not. True, genuine Sikhs support Khalistan because Khalistan represents everything that Sikhi represents. No one dares talk about these facts. We talk about facts. We dare to talk about facts. It's unfortunately people like you, JJMA, that really will not accept the truth. You've been too indoctrinated by Indian propaganda. Please, JJMA, wake up. Go read a little bit more. Go watch more channels than the Govt media. Watch channels like us and start to open your mind. And you might understand the truth of what's really going on. But thank you for your contribution nonetheless. I'm sure you guys in our audience have got some responses to this. But as I said, that video got hammered by Hindutva, but hammered by the algorithm. Very, very suspicious. That show where I talked about this allegedly this ex-Khalistani, it was a prime RSS template, RSS propaganda template, where a young, passionate Sikh joined the pro-Khalistan movement, but then got disillusioned and thought, no, they're just a bunch of terrorists, and then has now magically set up a YouTube account to say, oh, actually, I was wrong. They are all terrorists. Nah, you're on it. My audience, you guys, no, of course, you know, it's obvious. Again, you don't need half a brain cell to work out the truth of it. Mahesh Brar says, fake RSS propaganda. Yeah, exactly. AI created. He's standing in a foreign backdrop, which isn't even Indian. All fake, absolutely. Hatareki, yeah, you reported this channel. Now, interesting, actually, I've got a comment on this one, Hatareki. You reported it. Everybody should report it. Ironically, don't forget, we support freedom of speech. I support anybody who wants to call out the Khalistan movement. I won't support them accusing it of terrorism or extremism, but ultimately I respect their right to counter our narrative, as long as they don't come up with silly accusations like the terrorists and etc. etc. But ultimately, yeah, they've got to have their outlet. But unfortunately, what they fail in is they never seem to counteract our arguments. They come out with nonsense propaganda like, oh, Khalistanis are all extremists, they're terrorists, etc. But they never actually show evidence. They never actually show a genuine argument of why, for example, Khalistan's a bad idea. Why is Khalistan a bad idea? They never argue that. They just say, oh, anybody who wants it is just a terrorist. And this is why they're failing. So anyway, thank you, Hatareki. Satch says, yeah, it's just another puppet. Likewise, Sufton Muffins, this guy's from RSS. Yeah, I think we've all seen through it. You're on it. You've sussed him out. Basically, it's just another RSS propaganda news outlet. Oh, not even news, just propaganda outlet. And then this other video, this was actually, I have to say, even more concerning. This was the Hindu American Foundation video, where these guys were literally laughing at the assassination attempt on Gurpratap Singh Pannu. They thought it was funny. And they were just calling out the guy who the Indian government had sent and tried to hire a hitman who was being completely incompetent. As they said, if you're going to do a job, do it properly. This is the Hindu American Foundation trying to have credibility and laughing at the fact that their government, or the government they seem to worship, is murdering the Indian diaspora, Sikh diaspora. Anyway, but happy, absolutely. They're proud of killing innocent Sikhs, openly supporting the killing of innocent Sikhs to silence Sikhs. They're celebrating it. Even Indian news channels and misinformation spreaders. Major Rai you referred to, and the alternate media channel on YouTube. Yeah, they're on it. This is all part of this huge RSS network, massively resourced. So they've got social media, mainstream media, right across every outlet. They're on it because they literally have hundreds of millions of dollars in their funds to push this nonsense propaganda. That's why their network is global. And 1S1 and 2, it does spend its time spreading hatred and division. And yeah, you highlight this very good point. In fact, we've mentioned it here on Perspectives in the past, that one of their tactics is to approach law enforcement agencies, and this has happened in California amongst other states in the US. They approach, and I think it's happened in Canada as well, they approach law enforcement to spread lies about the Sikh community. They say, look, it's these Sikhs, they're all drug dealers, they're spreading prostitution, they're all up to all these criminal activities. Ultimately, they're just Indian agents spreading division and hatred, trying to turn US law enforcement against US Sikhs. And unfortunately, US law enforcement is now increasingly seeing right through it all. Thank you, Saib Jotatwal. Yeah, it's true there are some like the Sangashe who claim to represent the silent majority, but they are spreading nonsense, as you rightly say. It's just more propaganda, pro-Hindutva propaganda. But thank you, I wanted to raise this point. Thank you, Saib Jotatwal, for educating me. I did refer to, and I said I don't understand the nuances of the hierarchy, let's call it, for want of a better word, in the Sikh community. Of course, every society has some level of hierarchy. It's just natural class classism, if you want to call it that. We have it here in the UK. We have the working class, the middle class, the upper class. It's not caste. Caste is a very different thing. Caste is a very rigid and frankly very dangerous infrastructure that is killing India and is keeping the majority of Indians basically in slavery. The Dalits, the lowest caste. But unfortunately, it's nature. We are all of us in society, whether you're in a golf club, whether you're in a football club, whether you're in a company, in business, wherever you are, we always organise ourselves into hierarchies. It's just human nature. It's just the way we are. And likewise, the Sikh community has a caste system, I think is maybe the wrong way to describe it, but it has a sort of hierarchy. You've got the low caste Sikhs and the Khatris, who are the warriors. They are the higher caste, and some of them hate the Jat Sikhs, which are the majority. So again, thank you for highlighting and helping me try to understand the nuances of the Sikh community, because of course, we all sit in our various class levels in our societies. It's just human nature. Hatareki comes back. Now, oh yes, this is about reform. Yeah, you should think about reform. And Manveer is a little bit more suspicious. You say, look, you agree that Labour and Conservatives are left and right-wing mainstream parties. They have let us down. But you've got a lot of reservations about reform candidates. This is this new party here in the UK and their ethno-nationalist racist positions. Take care. Thank you. This is, I don't want to reiterate a lot of what I've said, but what I would say, the Reform Party has been accused of being racist and fascist of all things. Ridiculous. But those accusations have come from Labour and Conservative, because Labour and Conservative parties are facing literally... they're going to cease to exist soon because they have not represented us, either working class people or middle class right-wing people. Our mainstream parties have abandoned us to move towards globalism, the Mark Carneys of the world, the World Economic Forum. So there's a vacuum that's formed. That vacuum has been filled by the Reform Party. And of course, Labour and Conservative are terrified. So they're trying to label Reform as fascist and racist, which is complete and utter nonsense. Of course they're not. The Reform Party has many candidates from the Sikh community, from the Hindus, from the Muslim community, etc., etc. So of course they're not racist. Now, what I would highlight, of course, be suspicious. Always be suspicious of politicians, just by default, please. Doesn't matter. But what I would say is, apart from read their manifesto, is Nigel Farage, the leader of the Reform Party, has very, very deliberately removed, expelled any racist people from the party, because he knows they are trying to accuse him of being racist. So he's gone the other way and said, right, absolutely, let's make sure that anybody in this party who exhibits any racism of any description is expelled. Evidence of that, Rupert Lowe, one of our commenters reports about Rupert Lowe. He was part of the Reform Party. He is a racist. He's been expelled, completely rejected. Tommy Robinson has been... Nigel Farage distances himself publicly all the time from Tommy Robinson, because Tommy Robinson is accused of racism. Tommy actually isn't racist, but that's another argument. So the Reform Party is making every possible effort to say we are not racist, and we are proving it. Anyway, again, this is not a party political broadcast on behalf of the Reform Party. All I'm saying is, whether you support reform or not, please don't believe misinformation. All I'm trying to do is just highlight misinformation. You can vote for whoever you want. Vote for an independent candidate. Don't vote for Labour or Conservative. That's the one thing I am pushing. Don't vote for the mainstream. Vote for somebody else. No. I'm not going to be partisan on this. But all I would say is just please make up your own mind. Don't believe misinformation, particularly spread by Labour or Conservative. Anyway, final, we're well over time. I can rush through these. Punjab and TC send lovely messages to James. I don't know if you're watching, James. We do miss you. And Chardi Kala. I hope you're in Chardi Kala, absolutely. And some lovely messages towards James. Thank you, everybody, for your support and love being sent towards James. Of course, we do miss him. Siggy. I'm saying I'm a breath of fresh air. You're in the UK. You grew up in the 1980s. So did I, mate. Interesting, you say you're part of Baba Khalsa, which is slightly embarrassing because we're trying to say that Baba Khalsa didn't really exist. It's a creation of Hindutva. Oh, well, sadly, clearly it's not. Anyway, but as you rightly do say, good does always win against evil. It does. Truth always prevails. Good always wins in the end. It might take a long time to get there, but we will get there. Anyway, welcome to the show. Sing Y1. Thank you. Narinjit Singh Saini. Yeah, we do notice that you talk about the RSS and their modus operandi. Thanks for clarification, breaking the sinister narrative presented by making a short movie. You wish I'd come a few years earlier. Well, all things happen as they must. It would appear the universe does its thing. I must have been brought in at the right moment to push the Khalistan movement. Because there is a will, there is a way, there is this great universe doing its thing. So things happen for a reason. I'm a big believer in that. Whatever God that you follow, ultimately the universe created by whoever, we don't know for sure, but whoever created the universe has a grand plan. So yeah, much as I wish I'd been here a few years earlier to push this, maybe we would be a few years ahead. Maybe Khalistan would be here now. I don't know. Would never give myself credit for. But ultimately, yes. Everything happens for a reason. Amrik Singh. Yeah, great words or true rhetoric brings terror. I don't think I bring terror to Hindu RSS, but ultimately we're fighting for the truth. And the truth is what they're afraid of. The Khalistan and the referendum are robust. They're committed. They're coming. Khalistan reality is coming into practical existence. It absolutely is. It will soon be a geographical existence. It will indeed. Khalistan Zindabad. I have to finish the show because we're 5 minutes over time. It's been a very long show today. Anyway, that is it for another day. Thank you so much. Thank you to all you commenters. Brilliant comments. Thanks for all your support. Much appreciated. Do let me know if you've got anything you'd like me to cover. Many of you have been emailing me. Thank you for your links. Very useful, very interesting. If I haven't responded, it's only because I'm so rushed every day trying to prepare the show. But thank you for your support. Do keep the comments coming in. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your perspectives. Let me know news items you think that I've missed. That I should be reporting on. But that's it for another day. Thanks so much for watching. God willing, I will see you again tomorrow.